turn on my microphone so now you can hear me. All work session items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of work session meetings is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the Council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. Mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. Today, our business is the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget work session, and this is a two-part meeting that covered yesterday and today, May 10th, 2019, for council to receive presentations from staff regarding the City of Kingman fiscal year 2019-2020 operating and capital budget. So against that backdrop, I will turn it over to City Manager Bogan.
Thank you, Mayor. As we get ready to cover public works and capital projects, I do want to make a clarification. Yesterday, we had a conversation about the 3% for lease rates at the airport. I made a misstatement. The commission, the Airport Commission does have the authority to recommend rates. So we will have that as a conversation at our next council meeting, so that I want to make sure everybody was clear on that. So sorry for the confusion. We do have a little bit different rules for that commission than our other commissions. So with that noted, let's talk about public works. Before you, right here is kind of our, we talked about this yesterday about reworking our organization for the Public Works Department. And I really, again, applaud Rob for taking the opportunity to look at his operations to see how he can be more efficient and effective. And I think that this is a really good smoothing or shrinking the hierarchy of the organization in having more folks that are dedicated to getting the work done. So just wanted to show you what he's working on and what we've been talking about as far as the promotions and change in job titles that we were talking about yesterday. All right. So yeah, I really applaud him for that. The Public Works Administration, there is a 25% increase in this budget. For those of you that were not here yesterday, I will just take a minute to explain that there's a couple of things that you will see repeated on all the slides that I more than likely will not point out because they're ongoing. One is that, of course, we're proposing a 2% increase for our full-time employees, so that's indicated in all of the personnel costs. And then the internal services, we have increases for building maintenance and IT, so you'll see a number there, and that equates to a portion of the increases that we were talking about. There is in the Public Works Administration Department, the administrative assistant position are being reclassed. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the administrative assistant 2, administrative secretary, again, the effort to try to do more, I will say, work on performance measurements, grants, and the documentation that's coming out of Public Works. We want to see a little bit more time and professionalism put to those. So I think that those reclassifications will allow us to get that done. And then the other part that I want to point out is that the reorg has a project manager position that is included, so that we can do more project management, something that's kind of being I wouldn't say ignored, but more effort towards that. So what we end up with the difference from 2019 to 2020 is about $110,000 in their budget. So, okay, streets.
Manager, could you speak a little bit about the project managers, what kind of projects they are managing?
Sure, absolutely. Matter of fact, I'll actually turn some time over to Rob. He, of course, these folks are his responsibility. So, Rob, you want to cover what the project managers do?
Yes, sir. So this year was kind of a big design year for us. We've got the downtown outfall line, and we'll talk about some of these projects when we get to the CIP and water line replacement project out in Birdland, various locations. We've got a City Well 10, which we're looking to put online, main tank rehab, water storage tank rehab. So we've got a lot of projects that were designed this year, completed or designed last year, and are ready for construction. And we've got one project manager, and those are a lot of projects. We also have a lot of building maintenance projects that we've
Does that
got
include the
coming up this
injection
year.
well? Is that on the?
Yes, and that's, yeah,
schedule?
it's actually, they're going to start drilling that next month. So we've got a lot of projects coming up, and we need some people to administer those and move those through, so.
Okay,
That's-
thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions with regards to that? Good question, Mayor. All right, street operations. Street operations reflect a 41.9%, almost, well, pretty much a 42% decrease. I think everybody can guess why there's that large decrease. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it's worth noting that with Prop 413 going into place, of course, 0.5% going to dedicated road maintenance has gone away. So that accounts for most, if not all of that decrease. As far as the highlights within the department, the Public Works, of course, we've talked about the reorg and the superintendent being changed, transitioned to Assistant Public Works Director. And then a construction maintenance supervisor and an electrician 1 are being added to the division. The amount of time that we are needing to spend on streetlights, our signalization needs to be stepped up a lot. I know that Jack and his team have been just completely overwhelmed, and so that added position will be extremely important to them on that side. As far as pavement preservation, there are supplies and services capital outlay. With the repeal, of course, we're taking $3.5 million out of this year's budget that we had, and available for last year. So not much to report past that. Is there anything, Jack, that you wanted to add to that?
No.
Push your green button, will you?
Sorry, which one do I use here? Huh? No, we don't. We obviously have reduced our pavement maintenance budget significantly compared to what we have this year had. Starting actually Monday, the remaining balance of whatever TPT we had collected will start on the Andy Devine project. So that wipes that out. So next year will be just preventative maintenance type work. Got some that we're lining up and getting ready already. That is going to be dedicated or really focused on arterials and collectors like we talked about, to make sure we try and maintain those roadways. We have some miscellaneous other costs in there related to some bridge deck work and things like that, but no major projects slated for the upcoming year.
So my question is how much will the city spend next year on street maintenance? Because I know this is mixed in with all different types of maintenance, right? Like sweeping, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So when we just talk about pavement preservation, what's the actual dollar?
We have $1 million budgeted.
1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we went from the typical eight. It was like 800,000. It used to be, and it's just stepped up to $1 million now.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, as, just remind everybody that we were averaging over the last 10 or so years about 750,000. Yeah, so, and so, your 800,000 is close enough. So having a little bit extra, is helpful, but as we know, it's, when we need to be spending $7 million on street maintenance, even the 3.5 million, we were only halfway there, so.
Could Jack come back and give us a presentation plugging in the $1 million to his fancy program to tell us exactly what that does to our streets
Sure.
long-term?
Yeah. Not a-
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, we will hit that, we can hit that at the, sometime in the start of the new fiscal year, so.
So if I understand it correctly, from what you said, there will be no maintenance on residential streets.
That's correct. Our focus will be arterial and collector.
I think the public really needs to
afford it.
understand that. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Now let's move to CART. CART has a very large increase, almost 67% increase. They're not changing. Obviously, we're not changing really anything in personnel, and supplies and services are increasing due to we're going to do a transit study plan. I think that's been needed for a number of years now, but looking at routes, looking at where kind of the hub of where the routes tie together, I think that study will be extremely beneficial to improving the quality and efficiency of a service that we're providing. Really, that piece is really nice because ADOT's paying for most of it. So you gotta love those. You gotta love those grants that you get those. And then, Rob, did you wanna add anything to what you're doing in carts?
No, I think, so that $150,000 study, that's 80% funded by ADOT. I think something else to be useful in that is some of the new GIS system that we have. It tracks where people get on and off, so that'll allow us to see what stops aren't utilized and maybe prioritize which ones are. So I think that'll all be helpful.
Yeah, good. Okay.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
The funding situation, what it is, I know that the yellow route goes clear out into the county, and as I served as the liaison on that commission a couple of years, and I know that there's been repeated attempts by the city asking the county to contribute to fund that, and they've said no. Repeatedly, they've said no. So do we need to, wouldn't it be better for us to either have the county, fund that or to pull that back? I guess my question is, with our funding situation the way it is, why are we subsidizing the county on that route?
Well, I've not been part of really any of those conversations, Vice Mayor, but the thing that I would recommend is on CART, when you loop out into the county, of course, it would be wonderful to have the county participate, no doubt about it. The only thing that I would draw from kind of jumping out into the county with the CART service is that the CART system is user fee driven somewhat, right? So those people that are utilizing it are paying to utilize it. So you have that piece, but I think part of that is if we can get people outside the city that are coming in, they don't have any other transportation, we're going to be capturing. It's better for us to capture what they're spending here when they ride the cart. So they pay to get on the cart, they come to town, maybe they work, but hopefully they're going to the store as part of that. And so there's a portion of that where I think that we're helping ourselves bring in customers and employees into the city to help drive the economy. So I mean, I would love to see the county participate, but if we have if it's not costing us, if that route's costing us $50 a rider, then yeah, I think that's probably something that would be problematic. But if that route is costing about the exact same as the routes inside the city, I think we're offering that, getting people in and out of the city, utilizing our stores and having them spend their money here, probably has enough value to justify the route.
I think that the people on that route would probably use Kingman stores anyway, because to travel any farther to Bullhead or to somewhere like that would be an even greater expense to them. So I don't think that us subsidizing the county really matters there. I think that if we're going to spend the money to go outside of the county, it should probably be a route that goes into the industrial park, because that is actual employment. And the problem is we don't have any data to make these sort of decisions about, what's the annual city contribution to CART? I mean, is it general fund money? What's the general fund contribution that we're? So $275,000, and the county isn't willing to put up any money to have the yellow route. So, I mean, after 413, we said we needed to look at everything, and we needed to be really careful about what we spent money on.
True.
But, I don't really see a whole lot of that, tough decisions, That's
Yeah.
all.
Yep, no, it's good. Yeah, Ken,
Go ahead.
sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
If I remember right, Yellow Route has the highest ridership. Isn't that correct? Out in the county,
I guess the green route.
Yes, sir. Yellow Route does have the highest ridership.
which means it's actually helping pay for more of it than some of the other routes, which we have to counteract, because obviously it'd be great if the county participated. But ridership-wise, the Yellow Route is helping pay more, and of course, like Ron mentioned too, bringing tax dollars in too. So these are things that have to be weighed out.
Yes, sir. And I guess just as a little background, the Transit Commission has had discussions with certain board members from the county, and they are drafting a letter to officially request funding. And we're trying to compile some of that data on the number of trips and the benefits that are provided by the Yellow Route to the county residents.
Right. So that is a plus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I guess the only other question would be, I noticed that we don't do any advertising on the bus shelters. And is that a potential revenue source?
It is, and another potential is actually more advertising on the buses themselves. And so I know that I've challenged Rob and his team to be more active in that and see if we can't have that be a stronger revenue source. In the past, they've made a few $1,000s, and I think that they kind of got discouraged by that. And so a new push is definitely something that needs to happen there. So yeah, that's a good spot for
And I
it.
think just in the future, for future councils, if you were to have more data to show sort of return on investment, it'd be helpful.
Okay, good.
I have a question. And won't the utility of each one of these routes be examined and data collected as part of the transit study?
Yes, ma'am. And like I said, I think with the new GIS system that we have in place, it'll provide a lot of that data that we didn't have before.
Okay. Go ahead.
How many of the other cities in the county offer transit service like this? Bullhead and Havasu have bus routes, public?
Bullhead does. Havasu, once you reach that 50,000 population level, the funding scheme changes. And so Havasu discontinued their program, but they still receive, we're under the 5311 program, and it goes to the 53-7 program, I believe. So it's a different funding scenario. So they do provide it. I think when Kingman instituted CART back in the day, it was the largest city that in the state that didn't have public transportation.
Oh, okay. How much help do we receive to fund the program?
It's funded at different levels. Administration's funded at 80-20. Capital's generally funded at 90-10. And then there's a different split for some of the other elements. But
Okay.
generally,
So-
it's 80-20 or 90-10.
The city pays $275,000 a year, and then the majority is funded through grants?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Grants and ridership. Any other questions? Good questions, thank you. All right. Transit operations. So we've been talking a lot about I guess I do want to, there was one thing that was brought up. We have been, before we talk about the operations side, one of the things that we have done is basically surveyed the folks out at the industrial park for will a bus route work out to the airport. And we love the idea. We thought that there would be a whole bunch of interest. I know that we've tried to get the industrial businesses out there to encourage their employees to answer surveys, to tell us if there's interest or not. And the response that we've received, unfortunately, has been, I would say, less than underwhelming. Just a couple of people were willing to take the survey, and so it kind of left us with the unknowns. I know that we tried for what, Rob, 6 months to try to get responses back.
Yes, sir. We had attended a couple CAMA meetings and made presentations, but we have not received much response. I think that'll be another thing we'll look at during the
Study.
transit study.
Right. And so we're just, one of the things I wanted to point out is that the transit study, one of the things that's going to be important for us moving forward is trying to figure out if there really is a interest, or if it just, people just aren't interested in using the system out there. So that will be an important part of our study as we move forward. Just want to let you know that we had been working that for a number of months now, and just not getting. I was shocked. I thought that there was going to be this overwhelming, we need bus service out here, and just have not gotten that response. So,
Manager, I think over the years, this discussion has been on the table, and one of the barriers to the usage is the different times of the shifts. And I think that, so that may continue to be a strong barrier. It seems like it needs a different type of approach, like ride sharing tied to the shift changes, something that originates at a convenient place and takes them right out there at the times that they're really needing to be there. So I would just suggest, if there's any way to look at something, that alternatives of ways to deliver this transit service, rather than just a bus route that goes back and forth at times that probably aren't going to meet their needs.
well, it would make no sense to, if we, one of the things that we've tried to understand from CAMA is, and the individual employers are, when are the shift changes? Because it doesn't make any sense to have a transit bus go out halfway
Right.
through, they're halfway through their shifts. I mean, I guess if you're you're late for work, that works, but, you know, having those be convenient is part of what we've been trying to understand and pitch. You know, is there, you know, should we have one that, you know, is there interest in having a bus that drops people off at a kind of a central location out there at 6:30 in the morning? And is there another one that's needed at 11:30 in the morning, right? So that's part of what we've been trying to get our arms around, but we haven't even gotten that far because we can't get any of the employees to respond back that they would be interested in bus service. And I know that they've put in their, you know, the break rooms and stuff, they've asked people to kind of sign, are you interested in bus service and what times would you be interested? And I think we've gotten like 2 responses.
Well, I'll just give you my observation over years. The people that are out there have figured out a way to get there. It's the people that that can't get out there that aren't taking the jobs or getting the jobs because they can't get out there. And so it's kind of a catch-22. And so if you can create a scenario, and I'm thinking about the veterans here at Jerry Ambrose, they have a van. Well, they were looking for money so that they could take that van back and forth. So there are ways to address this that may, the intent needs to be to make it available for people who aren't able to work out there and aren't out there yet, but then they could be employed because they can get to work. And so you have to kind of take a leap there and figure out some strategies. I won't go in, I could go on, but I won't.
Good point. No, absolutely.
Manager Foggin, would it
Yes.
be, maybe the problem is just the way that the survey data is being, the attempts to collect that, the way that we're trying to do that, maybe it's not working. What about going into each one of the plants and meeting one-on-one with like the HR manager that would have a lot of that data? And then you could start to compile a model, and not asking the industries out there, like the mayor said, to comply to our model, but on the data that you get, building a model that works for the industries out there.
Yeah, I think that has been our, you know, I don't know how much individual conversations we've been having with the individual business owners or the plant managers, but I know that the desire was to make sure that the bus schedule
Sure.
was matched theirs, not
Right.
we're just going to give you
Well,
a service.
I know workforce mobility is an issue out there, and in my mind, it doesn't make sense to go into residential county if we're not going out into our industrial park to get people to their jobs. I think that should
Agreed.
come first.
Well, I would also suggest, because this issue has been going on for a decade, I know, talking to the temporary agencies. How can we facilitate, because there are so many temporary workers out there, it's a path into that employment. And so how can our services assist those that they know may be candidates but aren't able to get out there? And so I would look at a different set of stakeholders and incorporate those in the survey.
That's a good point.
I just want to add, very briefly, you know, I have a very small amount of employees, especially compared to these businesses out at the airport, and I would say that we always have at least 2 employees that do not drive or do not own vehicles, and that's a pretty high percentage when you consider we only have 15 employees. And those people only work for us because they live close enough to walk or bike. So I would definitely say that you're likely going to open up a bigger pool of employees for the airport. They would never apply for jobs out at the airport because they cannot get out there on time.
Right.
So I do think that, I agree with you guys. This is important, and maybe the need isn't there because they just don't have those employees right now. There's no way for them to get
Yeah.
out.
I don't think you can cite the companies because I don't think these private companies, transit isn't their deal. You know, I mean, what do they know about putting together a transit route? Or, you know, or the workers, they're just trying to get out and go to work.
Right.
So it's really, I think, falls on the city to go out and get the data that we need to be
Okay.
a partner.
Well, and when we do the study, we'll make sure that that's definitely part of, that's a good suggestion on the temporary employer side too, so.
Ron, Travis
sir.
and Jamie bring up a good point, because, and that might be something we could talk to the plant managers out there about, emphasize the point that, you know, there is a certain amount of people that they're not capturing because of mobility. And they might be people that are just down on their luck. I mean, that happens. And you can go talk to any of those plant managers out there, and they will go through typically 12 to 15 people before they can keep one. So our job, or, you know, our employee pool is desperate. And so if we can increase that employee pool, that might be a way to sell it to those plant managers, you know, as part of what we're all talking about.
That's a good point.
So,
Yep.
And if it actually ends up being a benefit to those companies, that kind of sets you up to ask for a financial contribution to the route.
That's a good point, too. Yep, absolutely. Okay. We will definitely add that to our plan as we look at the route plan and, okay. Any other questions? Okay. Water operations. Water operations reflects just over 11% increase. As has been indicated with the other public works departments, we do have some adjustments happening in our employees. We've had a couple of retirements, or at least one important retirement out of the water department, and that's allowed us actually to look at this restructuring that we've been talking about. So with the reorg, the superintendent is being reclassed to a crew leader in this division. That's actually, that piece is actually a cost savings. The supplies and services increase is due to well site and pumping equipment improvements, which we definitely want to stay up on those. The SCADA software upgrades, the SCADA is what helps us monitor what's happening at wells and tanks. And then outfitting some utility trucks. Capital outlay for the water department is the purchase of 3 light trucks for our hydrant maintenance folks. We desperately need to make sure that we are actively engaged in that so that when the fire department needs the hydrants, they are usable. So that's where we are with the water operations. So the water operations fiscal year 2019 was at just under 5.1 million. This year we're at the 5.66 million. So that's what the accounts for just over 11% increase. Rob, anything that you wanted to add to the what you guys are going to be doing in water?
Just, I guess, in supplies and services, and this is one thing you'll kind of see throughout all the divisions, is first aid supplies, PPE, you know, that's gone up in every division. Travel and training, you know, we've had a lot of turnover, so we've got a lot of newer folks on. So we're encouraging them or trying to get them out to trainings and certification testings and those kind of things. Meters, as part of our meter replacement, meter testing program, those costs are going up too. I can try to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, that's what we have for water. Oh, Mayor, yes.
I don't have a question on water. Is it okay if I just return a minute to transit?
Absolutely.
Because I really do think that it is a very important issue. And I'm going to suggest, while it's still on my mind, that as part of that study, that you look at a route that focuses not on the plant managers, because I've heard they're at CAMA, they're saying, yeah, that'd be good, but they're not the ones. Focus on a route that picks up that ties to the changes, but picks up at places where the potential workers are, and that is the temporary places, Arizona at Work, veterans. There's a whole litany of stakeholders in this community that are working with people who are trying to rise up, and yet transportation is always an issue. I can tell you from workforce, we would buy bicycles and everything else, but there's a pool there, and I don't have a car. They don't have any way out there. But if we had a route that picked up, not at Walmart, but at each one of these agencies where the people are, and then takes it out there tied to a time, at least looking at something like that and talking to those stakeholder groups, it would be a thing I would love to see in this transit study.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I guess if anybody has any, I mean, there will be a technical advisory committee for the study. So if you have any input or contact info for people you think would be
Well,
good to have
make
on
sure
there, I'd
I know
appreciate
when
that
it is.
information.
Because I know a lot of people that would be probably interested in talking about it, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have our wastewater operations. Wastewater operations increase is 16.4%. Again, we have the reorg hitting this department, and the superintendent is being reclassed to the Assistant Public Works Director position, and then a treatment operating supervisor and collections crew leader are being added to the division. So this is a pretty important change to us. We've had, I would say, a fairly difficult time making sure that we have proper leadership in place and the proper certificationed employees in place. So I know we mentioned this yesterday in our conversations where we were asking about, we're talking about the professional and technical, or the professional development, certification development of our employees. Out of all of our departments, it's probably worth noting that our highest turnover in employees is in the public works departments. And so keeping our people there is important to us, but making sure that we have money to train new people as people transition out. So, and I know that was mentioned for water. It's the same for the wastewater. Especially for wastewater, there's actually more technical certifications in wastewater due to the complexity of the system and what could possibly happen if something went wrong with the sewer system. So pretty important. So those reclassifications and additions are going to be important. Again, we're dealing with SCADA software, making sure that that's up to date so that we have a good monitoring system. We're going to do manhole line and treatment plant infrastructure repairs and maintenance. One of the things that we don't want to have happening, we want to reduce it as much as possible, is what they call I&I, or inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. We do not want to be treating water that was not originally part of the sewer system. And if we're not doing a little additional maintenance on those lines, they crack and water then gets in there, and then we're treating water that didn't need to be treated. So it adds to the cost of the operations. As far as capital outlay, the big thing in the wastewater is, well, is this being shared between all the departments?
It's in wastewater.
For your module building?
Yeah, it's in wastewater.
Okay. So one of the things that we've run out of at our public works facility is space for operations. And so one of the things that we're proposing this year is to add a modular building to supplement and to free up some space. We don't really have an adequate meeting space at the public works facility, and we're short on offices. And so we're proposing a modular to move our wastewater operations into a modular building, and that would then also give us a dedicated conference room for the public works operations as well. So anything else you wanted to add to that, Rob?
No, sir, but if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Okay. Pretty simple. It's, all right. Sanitation. We talked a little bit about sanitation Yesterday, obviously, we are going through a sanitation study right now. And the sanitation study itself will wrap up sometime in the fall. But prior to that, we have to have a budget. And so the recommended budget has a 5.3% increase. And this one actually adds an equipment operator B position. Does this add another day of another route? That adds another route, right? So this takes care of that route issue that we were talking about yesterday. So a new employee there. And then as far as the service increase, we've got rising landfill costs, the tipping fees going up, and we talked about recycling quite a bit yesterday. So I know that won't come as a surprise to anybody that it's costing us almost double to get rid of cardboard rather than taking it to the landfill. And we also talked about how much our system is, or how much our cans are being taken advantage of by resident or people that are not residents, which we're looking to solve that issue. So the proposal is to have the budget be just under 3.6 million, and that's the 5.3% increase over the 3.4 from last year. So, questions with regards to the sanitation? I know we covered a lot of that yesterday, so at least as far as the services we provide.
I was thinking about this yesterday after we discussed the recycling, and I wondered if we had ever looked into using rail to ship some of our recycling materials. I know at the airport we're beefing up the ability to ship using the rail service that's out there. Is that something that we could possibly do?
I think that's something we could try. I think before we've reached out and I guess probably didn't have the correct contacts, so that's something we can pursue.
Okay, I just wonder if that would cut some of the costs and even maybe be able to ship it somewhere where we could maybe get a better rate on it. You know, if you just filled up a container and then were able to load it, because that's not a very far trip from your yard out to the rail spur at the airport.
Yeah, technically there's a little bit to it, and part of getting it on the rail is you're going to want to be able to compress it so that you get the most value that you can on that cost of that rail car. But I mean, Rob and I have talked about that as an option. I know that there's other places that are using rail not only to do recycling, but they're actually using rail as a way to, they refer to it as transfer stations where they're actually doing garbage as well. If along that line there's a landfill, it really makes it a lot easier because you can put a lot more on a rail car than you can on a truck, and if you can compact it, even better, because then you get a lot of value out of that one rail car. So there are some of those. How close are we to the market? To a glass market, plastics market, and again, the one thing that's staggering about the recycling side of things is the contaminant amount is just amazing. Over 45% contamination in the recycling stream is, that's,
Right.
if you're at 25%, it's bad.
Yeah.
So
Well,
almost double.
Wondered if it would also be better to almost have some trash bins by our recycling, or at the edge of town. Maybe it would just be cheaper to allow people to put their trash in a real trash can instead of them sneaking it into our recycle bins. I don't know. I have no idea what the cost is like, to add another trash bin and to label it, please put your trash in here instead of in the recycle bins. But if we're taking their trash anyway, and there's, we don't have a way to, like I was saying yesterday, if you live outside of the city and you're getting water from us, you need to prove that you also have trash service. But maybe we should just give in and, call Mercy and give them a trash can to put their stuff in so it doesn't go into our recycle bins.
Well, as much as I would love to give them free trash, I think we've got a different solution. But it's going to require us to offer that service behind the gates at the Public Works facility that has personnel monitoring. I think is the direction we're probably headed with the program, if we're going to continue the program.
Sure.
Because if we put additional trash cans out, all we're doing is encouraging people to not sign up for garbage service outside the city limits, so.
Right. My one last question, and I know this has been brought up before, so forgive me if you've given me an answer on this, but I've forgotten what the answer was. I know it's been recommended before that we maybe could take our cardboard waste and shred it and then add it to the wastewater plant system to make better mulch. Has that been looked into? Did I already ask you this question?
Yeah, we did, and I think we have better results with using the wood chippings that we get from the Parks Department
Sure.
than we would from cardboard.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the questions. All right. Fleet services. Fleet services, very important department. It's an internal service, and it has a 7.1% increase. As with all the public works, this has a reorg portion to it. Part of the reorganization is that the superintendent is being reclassed to a construction maintenance supervisor. So that's actually a cost savings, but that, of course, will also help us move up the assistant public works director position. As far as supplies and services, we have hiring. We're proposing hiring a benchmarking consultant for fleet management so that we are doing, we want to know how we're doing. We talked about this a little bit at council meeting, knowing what vehicles are costing over their life, and then at the end of what we've determined is useful life, making sure that there's value in those vehicles so that we can trade them out and invest that trade-in value or cash value into new vehicles. And we're also looking at bringing city vehicles up to a visual standard. One of the things I know I've talked to several of you about is that our fleet that drives around this community represents this community. And if we're driving around dented, beat up vehicles, it sends the message that we don't really, I think, that we don't want that reputation for the city of Kingman. So, and the other piece of that is if it has, if I know that we have a few vehicles that are driving around where the white paint has failed, and so you have half a vehicle that's sitting there in primer. And so I really feel like if we're representing this community with our fleet, it needs to be something that we can be proud of and our citizens can be proud of. So we're going to tackle that as well. There's actually a decrease in capital outlay due to the fact that we finished some lift, the vehicle lift stations, and so our budget for 2019 was just under 1.6, and we're just over 1.7 this year for fleet. So, and very important. It's a very important department that doesn't get talked about very much because it's an internal one. So,
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we decide what type of vehicle will be purchased for the departments?
So they go through a specification list of what they need. So does it need to be two-wheel drive? Does it need to be four-wheel drive? Does it need to, do they need a box on the back? Does it need to be a flatbed? And then once that list is created, then what happens is the department can either get on the state contract system and try to find that vehicle. If it's a special order, then generally that's going to be something that's sent out to a number of vendors, depending on what vehicle you're after. It may be the standard cars and vehicle folks, or it may be, if it's heavier type equipment, it will go to those companies or those folks that deal in specialty vehicles. And so that's done with the department that needs the vehicle, along with the fleet who's helping manage the fleet. So in the past, that was done with Mr. Yoakum, and with his retirement, that's actually lately been, I think, that belongs to Jack, right?
It does, and I can add to that, actually.
Perfect.
So I'll kind of go through the overall budget, like we've all mentioned, the reorg portion. Training, we put a pretty significant increase into our training budget, mainly because we want to start driving some certifications and things. Many of those are related currently to EVT. I actually have 2 of the individuals from my shop in Vegas right now doing training with Pierce for the fire apparatus. So that training is actually very expensive for those 2 individuals for a week long, and doesn't cover all the courses that are offered. It is actually over $5,000 between the course and then the hotels, which the courses was almost at that $5,000 mark by itself. So those are some of the things we're trying to drive in training. The benchmarking, as Manager Foggin mentioned, we want to benchmark a number of things. Part of that will be determining what staffing levels we actually need in the shop. So we've actually been reaching out to some other cities, municipalities, counties, and talking to them and what they do and how they're set up and how they determine those. And one of the items we'll be moving toward and looking at are vehicle equivalency units. And that'll help us determine, based on the age and number of fleet units we have, what our staffing levels will need to be. So the first thing I'd like to say is, or preface this with, is this is going to be a long-term thing. It's going to be much like our pavement management system. It's going to take us a while to get all the programs and everything in place, and then we're going to be looking at funding and implementation. So it's going to be a long-term thing, but we got some really low-hanging fruit that we plan on hitting this upcoming fiscal year. So one of the other things we want to do is update our management systems. The current management system we have, I think, was around when they were still changing wagon wheels and putting shoes on ox. So it's definitely due for an upgrade, and that will help us do a number of things when we start getting into a vehicle replacement program, which will be part of this. It'll help us track those costs and see which vehicles are due. There's some other software that'll go along with that and actually helps you determine, based on a number of criteria, which vehicles rank highest for replacement, similar to our road system. It's just a good management system, and these all tie together. Once those items are, I guess it'll be kind of dynamic, these things will all be happening at the same time. Part of that will be, and I've reached out to Tina, she already denied me purchasing a money printer, so that means I've got to work with her in some fashion of how we would set up the funding and how this works. So use, say, Coconino County for an example. They take their fleet, you purchase it, they take 85% of that purchase price, and they charge that out over the duration for replacement. So say for a police vehicle is 6 years. In that 6 years, they bill out 85% of that. The remaining 15% is to be recovered by the sale of the unit that comes offline, and then they can purchase a vehicle. So they know every 6 years, unless something severe in the economy occurs, that they're going to be able to replace those units. So those are going to be the things we're working toward. And so the benchmarking you're seeing now, you'll probably see us doing that a couple years in a row for different aspects of the shop and different aspects of the program.
So that
So
kind of answers my question.
So it didn't answer your question.
I guess where I was really going with this is, one, resale,
Yep.
looking at brands that have a better resale value or brands that have a longer warranty. But the other thing is I think a good example is, I know we have had a Ford Explorer that was always parked here that I've used a couple times for things. And, you know, I agree, the city should have clean-looking cars that don't have paint chipping, but maybe our budget really isn't a Ford Explorer, it's more like Toyota Camry or, you know, maybe a car instead of an SUV and these kind of things. And so I'm concerned, you know, I know, I don't want to pick on HR, but they're getting a new vehicle. I'm curious what that vehicle is. Do they need, you know, an SUV, or could they get a smaller car? And especially if we're talking about traveling for training, shouldn't it be a fuel-efficient car, something smaller that can get people out of town safely but doesn't use as much gas and those kind of, so I'm asking,
So-
are we being good stewards with our fleet money and buying vehicles that are really within our budget, you know, a less expensive car, but that has a better, you know, resale? Because it isn't always the more expensive car that sells better down the line and
Right.
has a better warranty, those kind of things.
Yep. And so I will just tell you that, that conversations that we do have and have been having. So I will give you an example of so I've got a meeting where we have 5 employees going down to a meeting on Monday and trying to climb into a small vehicle with 5 people is pretty difficult. So I know that we're trying to buy vehicles that make sense, that we would hate to have to take 2 vehicles to accommodate 5 employees, kind of thing. But yes, we are having those conversations. You will have noticed. I was actually surprised nobody called it out yesterday with the vehicle. One of the vehicles that we're going to put out at the airport was a minivan that I got picked on for wanting to have, but
A minivan, you know, is
Right.
sometimes less expensive than that big third row SUV.
right, and cheaper to run around in too. So those are things that fleet is going to be helping with, and we are looking at how can we do different, how can we work those things differently. So yeah, I think that's good suggestions. Vice Mayor?
Ron, just a couple of questions. When I was the procurement director for the county, a couple of things that we did to be efficient with our fleet, and I want to know if we're doing this too, is we minimized the makes of vehicles that this county would purchase. So if you're only buying 4 vehicles or only buying Chevy vehicles, that minimizes the number of replacement parts and the training that you have to give to your staff. Do we do that?
Yeah, so we've limited, as far as I know, and Jack and Rob can correct me, but we've limited it to the 3 major American manufacturers is who we'll take bids from. So
Okay.
did I get that right?
So currently that, overall, that is the case. It's been the top 3. We're really going to refine that. And I don't mean for the answers to be secular, but it's really difficult in where we're going, what we're going to do to say yes or no to these. So you're exactly right. And that has a number of implications when you expand your fleet to different types, makes, models. Obviously, we have needs that need to be suited for different types of equipment, because you're not going to take a minivan to go fix a water leak or, go serve a warrant, most likely. One of the other things that comes into play, like Councilman Lingenfelter mentioned, was training. When you look at dealerships, they're specialized. And if we can bring the broadband knowledge that's really going to be required, mechanical is mechanical, but when you really start diving into how our vehicles are now, they're very complex. The tooling for these is becoming more and more expensive. You're talking about a scan tool used for pulling codes and doing diagnostic is over $6,000. So it becomes very expensive. So if we can limit that, another thing that we're going to be working on, which is one of the projects that will be coming in for next fiscal year that we'll be looking at, is actually having a well-stocked parts room. We have one now. We don't have a great system to manage everything in and out of that. It's just difficult with the people we have. But we want to make sure we have parts on hand that, when a unit comes in, we can turn it back out, and we're going to try and maximize the uptime of all those units. So that will be part of our vehicle replacement program, is trying to standardize what we are doing by make, model, by equipment brand, all those things. And part of that is going to be through purchasing, because cooperative purchasing is great, so we can jump on a state contract, and if Ford is what we decide that is gonna be the unit we want, we can go to Ford. There's a little bit of variation when you look outside. Some people are running Ford, some people are running Chevy. So it'll be data driven by us, what works for our fleet, and that'll be driven by our management system.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, whatever works best for the city, but the more that you can minimize the number of makes that you get it's the better, it's better. And then the other thing I wanted to ask from yourself and Tina is if we know that we're gonna be getting a new vehicle and we're gonna use that vehicle for 6 years, what we used to do at the county was we would take the purchase cost of that vehicle and we would divide it up over 6 years, and then every fiscal year, we would put 1/6 of the cost away into a vehicle replacement fund, so when that 6 years comes around, you auction off that old vehicle, but then you already have the money ready to make a new vehicle purchase. Are we doing that right now? Is that something that we could maybe look at doing?
That's something, and not to jump over Manager Foggen here, but that's actually something I want to work toward, that we have kind of an action plan of what our layout for fleet is, and that's one of the items. Like I say, Tina won't give me a money printer or
Sure,
a blank
right.
checkbook, so.
Well, I mean, I would think that it would try to ease the burden a little bit. Like if you know you have to buy a $50,000 car in 6 years, rather than just in that fiscal year, that $50,000 hit, if you span it over 6 years, it
Yeah,
helps.
I've been part of 2 systems that did that very thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. The program that Jack's talking about aids in that because it helps you identify the sweet spot in which to sell that vehicle. So you get the trade-in plus what you've been saving. And so, yeah, it's a program that I would love to see us have.
And
For sure.
My last question is, do we do cooperative procurement of our fuel?
So currently we are not, and I've actually been comparing that to Mojave County, and we're getting the same rate at this point in time. I recently spoke to Mojave County, and I missed the window for them resoliciting, see if I can speak English today, resoliciting for that bid. The goal would be in the future to get on to up the volume, because we can purchase from them off that contract, but it's the same rate. But if we can show a bigger volume between us and the county, I'm hoping that'll drive a better rate for both of us.
No, there's quite a few options. There's the state contract, there's the counties, there's another place down here called Mojave, where we get a better price. They just bid a differential. The vendors, they give it to you at a rack price, and then they add a differential, and then it's based on aggregate demand. So that's another opportunity for us to save some money.
Yep. Yeah, I know, like,
Fuel cost is
as Jack indicated, I know that they're looking at that. So,
Thanks.
okay, all right. Building maintenance, we're sitting in a room that is the result of some wonderful work that the building maintenance folks have done. Right now, we have reflected in the 2020 budget a 12.2% increase. The reorganization for the building maintenance is going to be a construction maintenance supervisor position that is included. And then the supplies and services increase to hire outside labor and contractors to assist with with the design and remodel and completion of some work orders. As good as our team is, we are very small and can only take little bites. And so there's still a need to go to outside help. And so that's what really accounts for a large portion of that increase. So the 2019 budget was just over $1 million. We will be this year at 1.165 million. And is there anything, Rob, that you wanted to point out specifically for building maintenance?
No, sir, but I can try to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. I'll tell you right now, our building maintenance folks are downstairs. We heard a little bit of them. They were pretty quiet yesterday, but they're taking on a much-needed HR remodel to add some office space that we desperately need, and we're going to change the location of our their conference room, so that there can be a little bit more privacy within the offices themselves. Because right now, if you go to HR and you want to meet in their conference room. You have to traipse through the entire department to get to the back of it. So that remodel, I know, is going to be much needed and much appreciated, so. Okay. Mayor, do you mind taking a
Yeah, let's
break?
take a 5-minute break, please. The order for this budget session. Back to you, Manager Foggin.
Thank you. Appreciate the break, Mayor. The next section, of course, will be our 5-year capital improvement plan. Some highlights of the CIP are that our total CIP is for 2020 through 2024, 164 million and some change. Our fiscal year 2019-2020 CIP totals were just under 48 million, which is balanced using the revenues, cash reserves, transfers, grants, and debt proceeds. Projects that are not identified do not have a revenue source. I know we talked about this at our last budget meeting, but it's worth making sure that everybody understands that we no longer have a wish list set of expenditures mixed in with what we're actually capable of doing. So we now have the 5-year capital improvement plan. All of those things that are on the 5-year capital improvement plan have revenues, proposed revenue sources for them. We do continue to carry a list of projects that we would like to get them done, or if we had additional funding, we would need to add, and those are referenced as future projects lists now. For the 2019-2020 CIP categories, we have water that has capital projects that account for just about 9.3 million. Wastewater has projects accounting for 17.3 million. Stormwater, almost 1.4 million. The airport has projects that account for 3.4 million, and the general government projects are just under 16.5 million. So you can see we're spreading the capital projects across a number of areas, and they're all, I would say, all very important.
The general government category includes transportation?
Yes. All right. So everybody should have this list. We're on, what page does this start on? 129, thank you. So the green column represents this year's capital projects, and just going to walk through them. If you have questions about those projects, please stop me. So we have the fuel station project. It was actually budgeted in this year's budget. We've been working on it. Making sure that we get it right has slowed down that project a little bit. And so it actually is one of those projects that's going to fall into the new fiscal year. That will create a fuel station that will be above ground, and it'll allow us to take the underground system out. That usually underground systems cause you problems over time, so we're looking to avoid those problems going into the future. The cart buses, I believe that's 2 buses, one bus? So it shouldn't say buses, it should say bus. We're replacing one of those this year. The Public Works Conference Room, we talked a little bit about that with the module building. And then the zoning ordinance update. For those of you that remember, we've been operating with a zoning code document that was not been updated for almost 40 years. So, and this is a multi-step process. We'll get $90,000 worth of work done this year, and then there will be a follow-up to finish up the remaining amount of that. Sir?
Question. I'm going to be referencing page 42 and 129. So
Okay.
here on page 42, the recommended expenditures for 20 are for the I-11 East Kingman Connection project. $9,096,465. And if you go to page 129, it looks like this is $400,000 less than the total of the 411 projects listed. So I just want to know what the difference is.
I can respond to that. So we have $1.2 million as funded for a portion of that, the I-11 project.
Yes.
We have $800,000 that's coming from cash reserves, $400,000 of that is contribution. We don't have the cash reserves on hand for that. I included $800,000 as in the expenditures and excluded an error, the $400,000 from the expenditure.
Oh, okay.
So we'll get that updated.
Okay.
It is part of the five-year funded project.
Okay, perfect.
Vice Mayor, your question was down here under streets, right?
Yeah, the 4 projects listed on page
Okay,
129.
I think
and then,
we were on facilities, right?
Correct.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to just go, because
sorry. Yeah.
I wasn't mentally there. I was still
Yeah.
thinking about the
Sorry.
facilities.
Yeah, we'll get to it,
I won't get it.
actually.
Sorry.
I'd like to ask about the powerhouse facilities. Are those, I think you were saying yesterday that there was some renovations needed there for current renovations needed. Is that coming out of this year's budget?
So they have been working at so the building maintenance folks have tackled a number of projects at the powerhouse this year, and there are some projects next year for the powerhouse. Specifically, we're going to add the drive-through sign and do some repairs to the parking lot itself. Gary, was there any other major powerhouse projects? That's correct. Right, so you'll recall that impaired driver took out our entrance sign.
Yeah.
And so that, I totally forgot about that, but yeah, so that's kind of what's planned at the powerhouse this year, or for next year, I should say, so.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah, you betcha. Continuing on down the list, we have some light replacement that's proposed at Centennial Park. That's, of course, the field lighting, and trying to make sure that you keep up with that. The light systems need to be changed out, as well as over time, the light poles need to be restructured. So we've got that across multiple years. We have an additional playground that we would like to tackle next year. You'll recall that we've done some playground upgrades this year, and we are doing a brand-new playground at the Firefighters Park that is actually scheduled to start next week or the week after. So we've been projecting that to start the first part of June, and the contractor has moved us up unusually. So yeah, it never happens.
Since we were there a few weeks ago for Arbor Day, I really like the sign that you've put out that has a picture of the future improvements and
Yep.
paid for by your taxpayer dollars. I really think that is an asset. So
Thank you, appreciate it. Mike did that. Thank you, Mike. Yeah. Yep. And then we have, of course, the big park project that's sitting out there is just under $400,000. That, you'll recall, was part of money that the city's been holding as far as development investment fees that have to be spent by the end of this year. And so we are proposing to spend those at the park or the property that was donated by Sunbelt Development. We're excited about that. We're not exactly sure how much work we're going to be able to get done with just under $400,000. We're just wrapping up a design. We've been working with a landscape designer on that, and once we get that design back from the firm, we will be able to cost out what each of the elements have, and see how much we can get done with $400,000. I've been talking to Mike about the ability for us to sit down with contractors and folks that could help us maybe be willing to do some pro bono work or some, some at-cost work where we pay for the cost of the employee, but they don't charge us for the equipment, some of that kind of stuff. And I think that we can make that $400,000 stretch. I mean, heaven's sakes, if we even got an additional extra $25,000, that'd be more than what we have. So that's kind of our plan right now. We've got to get that project's, because spending the money needs to happen now. We've got to get working on that as soon as we get the plans, or as soon as we get the design back from the firm. So you'll start seeing some more conversations with regard to what we think we can get done with that money. So,
You want us to ask questions?
as
You
you
want us to ask questions, or we acting with it?
actually, if you have questions as we hit the project, that would be wonderful.
My question on money,
Mayor.
I thought I did. Do we have, how long do we have to spend that money? I thought it was.
December
through the-
31st.
Oh, it's December 31st.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Or January 1st, I guess. Yep.
You're pushing it. No, that's great. That's great. That's enough time.
Two things on the fields.
Yes.
So they say ball field / soccer complex. Is it for soccer, or is it going to be soccer and baseball
So
mixed again?
the soccer fields are actually, as you recall, we had a donation from the Soccer Association. So they're adding new lights right now. So this will be baseball fields that already have existing lighting.
Okay. And then my other question is, I don't see any money dedicated towards trails on this list.
So we have trail projects, and that's probably a pretty good catch. Because it's, yeah. Yeah, correct.
The grant funding on that project, we've been in communication with state parks, and to get that grant money, that approval has to still come from ADOT. And they're really close right now to be doing, I just had another phone conversation with them 2 days ago. So that funding, we're really close to be getting that. And they say it looks like there's even more funding available for the project than we originally thought. So, and that like I said, it could be next week, it could be hopefully within the next month, but we're really close. We were waiting on a archaeological study, which I went out with Matt Driscoll from BLM, and we hiked the whole trail and mapped it and flagged it, and with the archaeologists as well. So they were kind of waiting on that to get that as well. So we're really close to getting that funding, so.
We are planning on having work done. Obviously, we would have liked to have had it done already, but because we're hostages to the money coming in. So yeah, that project we're still counting on doing. Like Mike said, they've failed to be able to give us a time for when we're actually going to get the money, because there's a couple state agencies that seem to be fighting within their own ranks. And so, but
Is that in the budget as a contribution?
through grants, right?
Grant?
Yeah.
But it's just not a capital.
And it probably really should have been a
Yeah.
capital project.
Yeah. Yep.
It's over the $50,000 threshold.
Okay.
Well, and if they give us more
Can still
money,
be added.
if they give us more money, it'll be,
I think it probably should be added
Yep.
as a contribution, because make sure we have it in the budget.
The other piece is, I don't think you were here yet. We had a big presentation about, were you here? About how trails bring in a lot of tourism, and how they pay for themselves, and why communities need to invest in their trails, and especially here when we have great weather and we have beautiful areas to add trails. So I would really like to see on the 5-year improvement plan, money dedicated every year, and then have a long-term plan for trails so that we continue to add on and keep bringing in more visitors to use the trails, and be able to maybe eventually even have some of these longer events like the Whiskey in Prescott that brings millions of dollars into their community and revenues in one weekend. So I know that last year we had approved a parks plan, and in that would have been a trail plan. What happened to that?
So we went out to bid sent out an RFP for the Parks Master Plan, Parks and Trails Master Plan. And the RFPs came in way, way higher than our budgeted amount. And so right now, we're just trying to figure out what we can do to either shrink the look to reduce the cost of or what additional money we can put into it to actually make it happen, because that is key to exactly what you're talking about. So, but yeah, we're trying to get it whittled down, because the bids that came in on that project were more than double what we budgeted.
So give me a number.
114 and 140 are the two RFPs that we received, and we have $50,000 budgeted, so.
How can we do a long-term trails plan? I mean, even if it's 10,000 a year, 20,000, I mean, it doesn't have to be.
You do it through having a plan.
So we cannot kind of put together our own
We
5-year plan with staff and the commission and maybe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely you can. And just, like I said, which trail gets it, when does it get it, which, where do we want to expand? All of that happens in a planning process. And, the question becomes, does $10,000 really get you anything, right? I mean,
It does.
if it
The
can
answer
get you, well, it gets you something. I don't know if it ends up getting you the trail system ultimately that you want, though, right?
Well, we know that at White Cliffs, we can continue to add on to that and add additional offshoots to make different types of hiking or riding. And then I've also talked to people about getting donations of land in that area. So we could have a discussion about making a 5-year plan just off of the White Cliffs area, which is a fantastic area, and it could connect downtown to uptown, so kids who live uptown have an ability to get on hiking trails and ride their
Right.
bikes. So my question is, can we work on that without having this professional parks and trails plan? Or do we need to have a discussion about putting money in this year to add to last year's money to make that plan happen this year?
Well, we will have an answer for that for you hopefully in the next few weeks, about what we can do or what we're able to do with the RFPs that we've received. And Mike's reached out to the low bidder to see if there's if we included some language in there that has driven up the cost, why did they come in so high? And my hope is that we will have put something in there that it was extremely expensive, and we can drive that cost down. Once if we can see that, then what we probably do is come back and say, hey, we can actually do this. We can't do it for 50,000, but we can do it for 80,000. And then how do we are we willing to push forward with that, something like that? So.
Okay.
Yep.
I know where we can get $57,000 of parks money.
All right.
Okay, so to be continued,
To be continued.
but noted
Yep.
that we need
Yeah. No.
trails development.
The Trails and Parks Master Plan really will encompass that's exactly why we need that, so that
That's what I pushed for
we want to have, I don't want to put down the idea that we spend $10,000 a year on trails, but it's probably wiser to say, okay, we have these 5 or 6 or 10 projects. Could we check off this one and this one with 20,000, and then save up and then do, go a year and then do, so that's what a master plan gives you, so. And yeah, like I said, we've been working on it, we got the bids back and, after we got oxygen and off the ground, passed out from it, we've just been trying to figure out where the heck, was there something that we requested that was just completely unreasonable, and that's why these came in so much higher, so, but we should have that answered here shortly,
Okay.
okay?
In the meantime, we are going to add a trail grant contribution under the capital project.
Actually, we'll add the project to the capital projects that covers the White Cliffs Wagon Wheel Trail expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, you bet. All right, we talked a little bit about the police department's lobby security remodel. Like I said, that has had some work done on it. We identified a contractor. The lead time for bulletproof glass was 10 weeks, which is going to throw that project into 2020. The automated dispatch alerting system, we referenced that yesterday when we were talking about the dispatch center. That's the $270,000. We also talked about the fire station remodel and training tower burn building project. 1.4 million gets us the station remodeled, gets firefighters moved away from the bays where diesel exhaust and the other things that are happening in the bays we know are causing cancer issues for firefighters across the country. So pretty important project. We have a fire station alert system for $80,000. That will get a couple of stations done this year and the rest of the stations done in 2021. Again, back to that diesel exhaust conversation, one of the things that we need to do is we need to make sure that our exhaust systems are upgraded and removing as much of the diesel exhaust as we possibly can when those vehicles start up inside the bay. This system's hooked directly to the exhaust system and vent that diesel exhaust out of the building. So that 140 should help us get on top of that. The radio console replacement, we also talked about that. That's the dispatch center's new system that will allow them to stay up to date with their technology. And any questions on any of those projects? I'm not going to spend a lot of time with projects that are future years. I'll just leave you those for you to look at at your leisure. So, okay. All right, on the streets projects. So we just talked about the one. Is that the one we were talking about? The 1.2 million that Vice Mayor had indicated that there was a couple different numbers. I know I talked to Tina. We're going to get those cleaned up. In part of the document, it showed 800,000, and then we had the 1.2. So we'll get that fixed. The East Kingman connection project, underneath that, I guess probably the easiest way to walk you through these and to make sure that we're answering all your questions is I'll look to, where's Greg? Greg, you want to just walk us through these projects and so that we're answering. I don't want to miss anything on these ones that are important. So if you want to turn on your mic.
So the dollar amount that's listed there for East Kingman connection, the 446, that was based on carryover of the Matrix contract, which council just earlier this week asked us to put a hold on. So we have notified Matrix on that. We've asked them to put that on hold. So I'm not sure if there's anything new we need to do with this money now, but we're not we didn't cancel the contract, so I think the money would still stay obligated there unless council does decide to in fact cancel the contract, so. Kingman Crossing Boulevard. The 6.8 million there included some carryover for design, 50,000 for design, 6.8 million for construction. That's based on the reduction in lane that council approved earlier in the year, from 4 lanes to 2 between Louise and Airfield. That's the latest 90% estimate from the consultant.
3 million.
Oh, yes, yeah, 3 million, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. So, and maybe I should turn to the sheet, but yeah, there's proposed 3 million from KRMC with that the development agreement for the Kingman Crossing TI that is included as part of that 6.8 million.
Greg, for those of us that have been on council for a couple of years, I noticed when I was going through all the numbers that in the fiscal 19 budget, the current budget year, for Kingman Crossing Boulevard, it was an estimate of 4.8 million, and then we discussed how it went from 4.8 to 8.1, and then when we reduced it from 4 to 2 lanes, 6.8. Could you just explain that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, so the last year's budget, we had 4.8 that was shown as funded, and we had 3.7 as unfunded. So a total of about 8.5, 8.6. That was based on the 30% cost estimate that AECom had provided at the time. Their 60 and 90% cost estimate actually came down to 8.1 million. So that's the 8.1. And then that came down another 1.3 with the lane reduction that council approved earlier this year, so.
Okay.
I have a question. Was that unfunded? There's 3 million of unfunded? did you say?
3.7 million unfunded in last year's capital projects. It was done differently
Okay.
last year than this year. There was a separation of funded and unfunded
Oh,
projects.
okay.
And then Rancho Parkway, we're showing 1 million in fiscal 20.
So I'll just jump in there. So one of the things that Tina and I have been talking about, along with the mayor, is that this, obviously, we built this capital project list prior to some ongoing developments. And so this line item is going to change. How much it's ultimately going to change, we're still waiting on a little bit. I think what our plan on this was, in talking with Tina, was that we would budget at least half of the money being expended in fiscal year 2020 and the rest of the project expended in 2021. So I think the entire project estimate was, we've been using the number that was, what,
42 million is what's here.
Yeah, about 40 for construction,
Yeah.
2 million for design and right of way.
Right, so somewhere between 42 and 44 ultimately for this project. Like I said, how that actually ends up being spent over the next 2 or 3 years is anybody's guess at this point. But what we're just planning to do is show half of it in 2020, half of it in 2021. That would seem to be a good way to account for it right now. But as we move further down the path, we'll obviously have a better understanding of timing of the project and funding needs for the project, so.
Prior to it coming back to council for approval, you mean? Or the budget approval?
As far as displaying it in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way we're gonna display it, or at least the way we're planning on displaying
I
it
got a half
is-
in 2020.
Yeah.
But as the information comes in, that could be shifted
Yeah, it could be,
more
absolutely,
toward the,
right.
having it in the first year, 2020?
Yeah, how much ultimately will, obviously, this is a very big project, and it appears, just based on where we are with funding and where we are with the design of the project, that it would be a pretty good, it would be pretty safe to do half in 20 and half in 2021. So, but of course, we all know that with a budget, it's a roadmap that's,
Right.
we're trying to drive by. And, you know, if we spend, in 2020, we spent 12, 13 million, then of course, 2021, we would put the rest of the project in 2021, as an example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Or 18
just
million or
can't,
whatever.
you can't work it the other way.
Yeah, can't work it the other way.
That's
Yeah.
what, well,
Yep.
the start.
Yeah, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, is there any harm for appropriating the full 45 million? Because it has to be appropriated in order to be expended.
Correct.
And just because you appropriate it, it doesn't mean that you're going to expend it, right?
Right.
And so, 35 million of the $45 million is envisioned to be coming from other sources, either
Correct.
government or donations from the private
Correct.
sector.
Right.
And there's a chance that could happen in this next fiscal year,
Yeah,
as
well,
far as I know. And
the
then
donation part of
county,
it-
or the city's really only going to be on the hook, hopefully, for around 10.
right.
So I don't see any harm in just, why not just appropriate in fiscal year 20, the full 45 million? And if you don't spend it, you don't spend it, right? But
Yeah.
at least if you appropriate only 20 or 21, or whatever you just said, and you get 35 million this next fiscal year, and then the city gets its 10, you won't be able to spend it all.
That's true, but the ability to spend 40 million in fiscal year 2020 is, I mean, with the budget, we're trying to show, I've got no problem putting 44 million in there and showing 44 million, or the contribution of the 35 or whatever. It's just, we're trying to paint a realistic picture of when the money will be spent. How it's displayed is I can go that way pretty easily. I just don't know that it's as accurate. I don't think that's as accurate as we would want to be with the budget, but I mean, I got no problem with that. We can make that change.
I think I would support that because it can be rolled over, and it is possible to get those contributions. But I understand your point, which is it may not be very possible to spend it all.
Yeah, well, it doesn't
But-
prohibit
but
us
it-
from
but-
taking the money.
But, right, I understand, but because of it's kind of an extraordinary opportunity potentially, so why not front load it, and then we can roll it over as it really
Okay,
hopefully comes into manifest, if you will, it manifest.
well, we'll show it that way, and if you
Okay.
like it,
Yeah,
we'll go with it.
We'll know what the state's budget looks like maybe by the end of this month or
Hopefully by,
first part of June.
no, I'm hoping that we're within a week of knowing
I know
that.
that they've
June
already submitted
20th,
to the
or
governor.
May 20th, right,
Okay.
so, yeah, yep.
But it
Yep.
is a multi-year project anyway. Oh, sorry. But it is a multi-year project anyway, correct?
It will be.
Right.
It absolutely, I mean,
So it's sort of a moot point.
yeah, it's how you report the money.
Right.
So how we do it.
If we are going to get it, and that's possible, and if we're going to maneuver funding for the city, which is possible, it does make sense to have it there so that we have all the opportunity that we need.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we certainly wouldn't want to slow down the
We don't
project
want-
because we didn't
don't wanna
budget
tie our
enough.
own hands just
right.
by
Right.
this kind of
Okay,
budget
yep,
process.
we can do
All we're
that.
doing is appropriating in 20, and then it can be explained
We
exactly
footnote
what
it.
we're doing. I mean,
Yep.
for the citizens to understand it.
Yep, we'll footnote it, for sure.
Going back to Kingman Crossing, do we think that the $6.8 million will be spent in 2020?
No, we do not.
See, so that, it's parallel then.
But-
Just,
I think these
But-
should be treated, you know, almost the way you treat your kids, and you want to be
Similar.
fair to each
Yeah.
project
There you
and
go.
setting them
I
up.
would love to tell you I would love to tell you that we're gonna build and spend the 6.8 million in this next fiscal year as well.
I think everybody would love that.
everybody.
But I think where we are today, if we were further down the road, literally, figuratively,
That's the
then
beauty of
we
having the
would
options.
absolutely be, I'd tell you that, yeah, we're gonna spend it, but where we are today with the agreement,
Yeah.
so,
Well, the intention on both of these is to get them
Yep.
going and to do everything we can. So
right,
I agree. We should put all that down there.
it's all good.
Let's set the intention.
Yep.
We are gonna build this next year.
Yeah, we'll put a footnote.
Yeah.
How's that?
Put a footnote. Maybe
This
that's all
may,
we've
this may
needed
not be
the
realistic.
last 40 years.
All right, sounds good.
If I may, you know, completing the designs for both interchanges is going to take some time because there's going to be ADOT reviews and ADOT IGAs that are required for both of them. So we're probably looking at 6 to 9 months there just to complete the design and then
Yeah.
iron out whether ADOT has to procure the work within their right of way or whether they allow the city to do that, and then bidding and getting contractors on board. So
Process is what it is, but this does set the intention.
I guess from a procurement standpoint, it probably wouldn't be appropriate, to go out and do any sort of a contract if you didn't have all the money appropriated in that fiscal year.
No,
it doesn't if you
yeah,
don't get the money.
that's a good point. I think that,
You're not,
Yeah.
as a contractor, you're not going to want to do a $45 million, bid on a $45 million contract if you look in their budget and they've only got 21 million appropriated. And you don't know what's going to go on next fiscal year.
yeah, the appropriation doesn't guarantee you the money either, so,
You know
but,
what, we've already agreed.
yeah,
So
we're gonna
I think
put the
just
whole
have to
amount
do
in
it.
2020, so, yeah.
And it's gonna be good.
Yep, perfect. All right, and that we knew that was gonna be a change. Of course, we've been working on capital project stuff since December, so you forgive us, a few of these things have changed just within the last week or so. So anyway, moving on, I do want to point out the Andy Devine ADA project. This is a Phase 2 project. We successfully wrapped up the Phase 1 project. I think it looks great. It's certainly improved ADA access from the part that it was in. This is part of the CDBG grant project. So you will see the lower part of Andy Devine done. At the Public Works Department, one of the things that we are very concerned about with speed and the size of vehicles that not only we're driving, but that are using the road with us, at our Public Works Department, is that we for a huge safety issue for our people and for the people traveling on 66, is that we need a deceleration lane for our trucks and the people visiting Public Works to get off, to be able to make the turn safely. So that's the 180,000 that's there. The downtown streetscape project, 175,000 in 2020, 300,000 in 2021, and this is a project that is something that we've been talking about, where we've absolutely got to put a plan in place that we know what we're going to do with our downtown. We've got to have a plan. We've looked at the plans that have been prepared in the past, and whether there was enough community involvement in those or not, it really doesn't matter. I think it's clear that the people that were involved have changed out for the most part in the downtown. So making sure that we have good public input is part of that design is going to be extremely important. But that's what we're planning on kicking that project off this next fiscal year.
Ron, just a quick question on that.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
compare this 5-year capital plan with the last one, for the downtown streetscape? It went from like $700,000 or $800,000 down to 475. You know why?
Ms. Tina, you want to talk to that?
Talk about the DCR, so this year we funded a design concept report for $475,000. Rob might be able to give an as to why
Yeah, originally, it was the 800,000 was based upon a grant application we had submitted to the old Transportation Enhancement Program. And that was for design and construction. But that was a very old cost estimate. So with this project, we'd just be funding the design concept report, which would do the engineering analysis on curbs and, all the other infrastructure. It also would address any amenities, landscaping, public art. It would have a extensive stakeholder process that would generate a lot of public input, but it would complete that design, and then we would have an updated cost estimate for construction.
So am I right that this $475,000 is just for the design concept report? Is
It's
it
for
just
the design concept report and final design.
But no actual improvements that people can use?
That's correct. Until we have that and know what that's going to be, there's really no work that we can actually do. Now, I do know that we've landed on the WACOG list for some improvements to the downtown for 2022 for, I think, what was it, $400,000 worth of
Yeah,
work?
that's another project. It's a highway safety improvement program, and that would include 3 of the bulb outs at 4th, 5th, and 6th, and those are identified based upon accident records and injuries and fatalities.
So the idea would be to wrap in whatever design we have with that money to start some construction in the downtown based on the plans that we're able to generate from that.
How long is the design concept report going to take?
I would guess that we're, 6 to 9 months?
Generally, I'd say about 9 months, but,
9 months.
when I talked to consultants about this project, I did let them know that, we anticipated a pretty extensive public input process, which could extend that time
Yeah.
frame.
I guess I'm just asking for 2 reasons. It doesn't sound like for maybe the next 2 fiscal years there's going to be any sort of physical improvements downtown. Is that true?
I think that's fairly accurate, yeah.
And if that is accurate, I think that the council needs to look at a dedicated downtown funding source, whether that's creating a boundary downtown or something to sort of push things forward faster. That's just my opinion. Thanks.
Yep.
Are we coming upon another CDBG grant? Every couple of years you get the large grant. Is that
Every other year, I think,
And-
is how it's been working.
the one that we just did the ADA improvements with? That was from a couple years ago, wasn't
Correct.
it?
Yep.
So, is that a possibility? Is that we're about to get another large grant from them and then we can use
Well,
that?
that's what's going to do the Andy Devine, but CDBG you have to remember that CDBG projects have to go towards, what's the definition? They have to be used for improvements that are specific to, I don't want to say disadvantaged project, or they go to aged projects, they go to sidewalk projects that improve pedestrian mobility. Using CDBG to improve to do the downtown is pretty unlikely that would be approved.
Well, I think if we did the same sidewalk project that's being done on Andy Devine on Beale Street, That would be a major improvement to our downtown.
Well, yeah, and all they're doing is changing out driveways and making it so that you can get around, so that when you come to the light poles that they've put in the sidewalk, that you have the ability to get by those in.
Right.
In-
Improving walkability. And I think
Yeah.
that's I would say, one of the things that we're hoping for downtown.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
2 years is a long time just to design something. I mean, that's really stretching it out, and we're missing the boat. The improvements and the energy behind it is happening now, and if we wait 2 years, I mean, that's just too long.
Manager Foggen, may I add to that for just a moment?
Yep, jump in.
So the CDBG, I don't know if you guys remember in the transition between Manager Bacon and Manager Foggen, those had been set aside for ADA, so the 3 years out that we were looking, 5 years out, we were pushing those toward ADA because part of the requirements for pavement preservation is once you reach a certain trigger point in a type of treatment, they consider it an alteration to the roadway. Once you make an alteration, you're required to update that road to the current ADA standards. And so when you're looking at that, roughly you're looking 30 to 40% increase on a roadway for, say, a mill and fill. And so that's where those monies had been set aside. That's just a background information for why we had programmed those funds out the way we had. Our pavement preservation program isn't very robust right now, but we want to continue to look toward the future because we're going to have to meet those requirements as we move along.
So all of our future CDBG grant opportunities have already been spoken for? Is that what you're saying?
ADA improvements line is just above the ADA. That's
The next one?
yeah, and the
Okay.
one after.
Okay, so I think I didn't understand that I was under the impression we were using all of this grant money that we needed to hurry up and use because it was there and it was expiring, but we were actually committing all future grants as well.
Correct.
Okay.
I would suggest that this is somewhat a side effect of 413 also.
It is.
Loss of capital improvement funds for the things that, like downtown. And it is, it's something that really setting back the progress that we had hoped to make down there. So, but the only good news here is that we did, as a council, want a completed plan
Yep.
prior to making major changes, and so this will at least get us a step in the right direction and set a plan for the future that we'll all agree on.
Well, and the one thing,
A big stakeholder process, and we'll all agree on.
the one thing that we've talked about, and I'll have to talk to Tina about this offline, is the ability, if we have the ability to speed this process up so it's done in 1 year, and then if we have funding sources or a funding source identified, then to start some kind of work in the
That would be
preceding
good.
years.
That would be really good.
I think that's,
So maybe maybe this is another case where
it
we
gets
should
put together.
We should put
Yeah,
the whole money in the
Yep.
first year, and just in case we can't
Yep.
speed it up.
agreed.
Thank you.
Manager Fogg, may I make one clarification, just going back up? When we say we're going to put that full 45 million into fiscal year 20,
Yes,
for that would be both the Airway Avenue project at the top and the Rancho Santa Fe TI, right? Yeah, okay.
All I-11.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent.
Because they were
good call.
separated
Yep.
out. So.
Yep, good call. All right, downtown, so we'll make that 475,000 for 2020, so, okay. The Eastern Street project, we're going to do some, we continue to do some work on Eastern. For this year, we're proposing $350,000. This additional prep work that needs to happen, there's a little bit of work that will happen in 2021, and we've received WACOG funding for $3.3 million, and that project will actually realign Eastern. It will basically get us out of having to have one-way streets to connect as it does now. So is there anything else, Greg, on that we wanted to talk about?
So, there's, the total project's about 10 million. There's a
Right.
future phase to this on page 185 of 7.2, but the phase that's shown here would take from Airway to about Calumet. So it would bypass the two one-way streets. It would flatten out the curve that's there now at Eastern and Kenwood. We've acquired some of the right-of-way there. There's still some right-of-way needed to make that connection to Airway. We're in contact with the owners on that, and we're planning that carryover. That 350,000 was mainly for right-of-way acquisition. The total, the 85,000 that's in 2021 is for designing the phase that we have the money for coming from WACOG in 2022. The current design now shows the entire project from Pasadena all the way to Airway. We're going to have to rehire the engineer to resize the original design back to what we can afford to build with that 3.3. The other thing I would add is we weren't successful. We did apply for a highway safety improvement program grant on what would be the second phase of that, and we were unsuccessful on that. But we'll continue, and hopefully at some point in the future, we can get some more WACOG money on this.
I would suggest that this is another casualty of Prop 413.
Well, the timing
Because
is,
this is a big loss. There are so many citizens that have been complaining and suffering traffic incidents because of the condition of this road. But I do want to thank WACOG. It's wonderful. This is a big contribution from them to dedicate this much money to the city of Kingman. So that really is a help, and I'm glad we're using it very productively. And I guess there's no way to expedite these things, but
yeah,
but
would
the
love
public
to,
needs
but
to know that we are able to make some progress on it, and courtesy of RACOG, I appreciate it.
I have a question for Jack about Eastern. Seems it's not long after 413 hit the dust. We had a storm, and then we had all these potholes on Eastern, and people were getting flat tires, which is ironic. But anyway, is Eastern failing? Would you consider it failing?
Yes, definitely. So, 4 years ago, I can't remember the exact time frame now. We did a scrub seal, and at that point, when Manager Doherty was here, the goal was to get 4 or 5 years out of that roadway, and we'd be constructing. And that's when it was actually under design, and obviously that didn't happen. And then the anomalies we've had this year with the crazy weather, the October 3rd storm, and then February, have just really taken a toll on that road. So we have some repairs that we want to do to it now. Reached out to one of our JOC contractors, got some prices back. Timing right now is a problem. It is crazy busy in the private side, so for us to try and get work done has been really difficult. We've got it patched together, but if we're looking years out, we're gonna have to do something fairly significant, which is unfortunate because it's money that could go to the construction. But like I say, with the loss of a dedicated funding source, we're gonna have to actually preserve what is left of Eastern to try and make it until we can actually reconstruct.
Are you going to be able to do that with the budget that you have?
We're gonna have to.
Gotcha. Okay. Or we could turn it into gravel, right?
That might not be a great one, but we could.
probably not Eastern.
Just a suggestion. Thank you.
All right. Greg, do you want to just finish walking us through those last couple of projects? Or maybe that's Rob, this safety corridor.
So the Stockton Hill Road Safety Corridor Project, that's another highway safety improvement program. That's a 5%, 5.7% local match in that program. That would construct high visibility crosswalks at the hospital entrance, do some median modifications, try to improve visibility in the left turns. And again, that's HSIP project budgeted for next year.
You want to take the bridge repair as well?
I can do the bridge repairs. So we have, the two bridge decks on Wallapai Mountain are due for some, minor maintenance right now. We'll replace some bellows and maybe a seal coat on the top just to extend the life of those. One thing that is in play currently this fiscal year is we have a engineering consultant, looking at the bridge decks. Those bridge decks currently are about 40 years old. And at some point in time, we're gonna have to replace those decks. They are in good shape right now. The annual inspections show they're in good shape. So it's not a worry right this minute, but what I want to do is work to set up a funding mechanism, because we know in a number of years, we're going to have to do a deck replacement, which is probably going to be in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million. So I don't want that to sneak up on everybody when that does occur. I'm hoping that's pretty far out, but we'll figure out what that time frame is, and then you'll probably see something similar to that every year, trying to put money away, anticipating that need.
Okay. And then, of course, the final one we've talked about a little bit already, which was the pavement preservation number. That would be, we're proposing to do $1 million worth of pavement preservation this in 2020. Okay. All right. Okay, airport. All right. Gary, you want to get a microphone down there and talk about your proposed capital projects, since you know more about them than I do?
Okay. On the three industrial roads, that will be as the grant that we're waiting on right now from the Arizona Commerce Authority. Mr. Foggen, we did get a little bit of a hint at the AAED meeting that we were looked favorably. So that probably shouldn't have come to us down there, but the guy just happened to be in a conversation after a couple cocktails. So it was good. The airport master plan, it continues. That's our piece of it. Or remember, that's mostly funded by the FAA and ADOT. And then Steve and I are actually going down in June to meet with ADOT and the FAA again and look at the 5-year capital outlay on that. Environmental assessment on and again, that should be changed to the 1,800 acres. That's the piece of it there to make sure we stay on track for that release. And then the other one that's in there is the 350, which is that 16 acres, and that's the pit that was used for the burning. On recommendation, we also went back and looked at and actually attended a webinar on brownfields. So we're pretty optimistic that maybe we have a better shot than we thought of grant funding on a brownfield situation there. And then the other one that's 100% funded is the reconstruction of 321. So anything you see out there in the future, one of the things you guys probably would question maybe is the terminal, and that's always just has been plugged in, but if we ever would come back to commercial air service, we would probably have to reconsider a terminal to meet all the FAA requirements and stuff. But, so that's a reach, but I think the biggest thing with us is we make sure that it's put in this capital budget, but also that we're doing it with ADOT and everybody else too. So that's it for any other questions anybody might have. So
I don't know where we're gonna be at with the draw site this year.
I'm sorry.
So I don't know if we're gonna get a large infusion of money to clean that up, because we're the work party now and that might need to be addressed, so. And I didn't think about that until just now. 30 million?
Government math, right there.
Let's revisit that, please.
Yeah, so we're adding a draw site
Yeah,
infusion.
I hope it's not 30 million.
Take it out of the chief's budget here.
Are we adding a draw site budget item?
We have it
That, I
for
mean-
the investigation piece, but it sounds like we need to add something
For the actual,
Investigation should
the actual project?
with that, it's just all, I doubt it'll be this year. But as the time it takes to get your plans and everything, as we're talking about these other projects early, may pop up. The
We'd like
stars
to-
go line.
We
We'd
want to
like,
keep that moving along,
yep.
whatever.
I think the last number we talked about,
Was it
about 30.
Was it really?
process shouldn't be the reason why
It
it's
shouldn't be
delayed
the
longer.
driving force for project delay.
All right, next.
Again, all from DOJ.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to stormwater. Stormwater, as you will recall, is our new enterprise fund. I mean, what am I saying, stormwater? Sanitation. Sorry, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Sanitation. So the sanitation, Rob, do you want to just walk everybody through this piece?
No trucks this year, and kind of dependent on the rate study on when we would have fund balance to do truck replacement.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, again, we're waiting for the study to be done before we make any recommendations or changes to the service, so.
Gonna buy almost $2.5 million worth of trucks, that's gonna really affect the rates, isn't it? Compared to the private options.
We'll see what they show us, for sure. All right.
Just a question, in other cities worked at, how often do they replace? How often should you replace?
I've never worked for a city that had its own sanitation. It was always contracted out.
I think, and Jack might have some insight on this, I know that when we had talked to Mesa and Tempe about their replacement program, generally, they're keeping their fleet for 6 to 7 years, is what their plan is, to rotate that through.
Just like the other vehicle we're talking about.
Yeah, so the type of vehicle, the service duty and different things are gonna tie into those years. So, say a typical sedan. So when we were talking about vehicle equivalency units, that's a typical sedan, a basic admin car that, you're gonna be going to and from places. You can figure roughly about 9 hours a year is what the maintenance needs on that are gonna be. So that's one vehicle equivalency unit equals 9 years. You look at a trash truck, that trash truck is 24 and a half equivalency units, and I'm not gonna do the math because I'll get it wrong, but 24 times 9 is a lot of hours per year. You look at the capital outlay for the trucks, so it'll vary. You can look at other cities, but when we look at our service and what we do, you're gonna be probably looking in that 6 to 8 year, looking at Tempe and Phoenix and some of the other places.
And our average truck is 15, 16 years?
I don't know exactly for sanitation off the top of my head, but I do know we got some units that are still in service that are from the 90s.
From the 90s.
So that might be the average.
That was
All right. Now, stormwater. As I was saying, just as a reminder, stormwater is now, has its own enterprise fund, and we're going to need to develop some rate structures for that. Who wants to tackle the drainage projects? Okay, Greg.
First one that's listed is turn my microphone on. Airway Avenue Drainage Improvement, and that is a project that resulted from the storms from last October. This is a drainage channel that runs north-south near the White Cliffs Middle School. And during that storm, the water overflowed the banks and flooded the school. So this is a project to redesign that channel. There's a channel for a box culvert design on Airway Avenue. And this project would work in conjunction with the Airway Avenue Street project that we've already talked about previously. So we're hoping to include an infiltration basin in this channel work that we have I think we have enough existing right-of-way to incorporate an infiltration basin design into the work. So I don't expect, council did approve a contract back in January for this work. I don't anticipate having final plans until September. But that should leave enough time to get something constructed next fiscal year, so. Beverly Avenue is one that we're talking about the segment between Western Avenue and Stockton Hill Road. And that's kind of been piecemealed with curb and gutter and sidewalk over the years. The hospital has completed their work on the north side of Beverly, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Several years back, the city had a drainage plan that was prepared, and it included some concept plans for Beverly Avenue, because there's a significant amount of drainage that comes through there. That's the reason we have $50,000 for right-of-way acquisition. As part of that drainage is gonna have to cut south through some commercial properties there to get back to the ADOT drainage channel, similar to what occurs at the In-N-Out Burger place there now.
Can I
Yes.
go back one and ask you a question about the Beverly Avenue project?
Yes.
In this picture, you can see how these cars are parked in that dirt. And then that curb, is that curb gonna run right along the edge of the street? You're not extending the street out.
It would essentially line up with the curb that's at In-N-Out.
So this is kind of a crazy area right now, because big trucks come through here and try to turn around at this intersection that's right here, and then you have cars along both sides, and it's squeezed in, and then people are trying to get out of the driveways and they can't see. So I wonder if we're gonna look at the traffic and the parking once we put these curbs and gutters in, and maybe not let people park on one side or the other, or?
We've talked about that, and we'll talk about it again at our traffic safety committee, but yeah, our staff would support restricting parking on Beverly.
I don't know if.
And perhaps putting in,
It is
center
crazy.
turn lane and bike lanes if there's sufficient room.
You know I love that.
But we would definitely need to eliminate parking
Okay.
in order to have bike
So
lanes.
that's, oh, well, then let's eliminate it all. No. But just as long as we look at that, I don't know if there's a lot of accidents along there now, small accidents. Do you have problems with accidents in this area in Beverly? Sorry, I caught you off guard. Anyway.
We're talking about that area, actually.
Yeah, we were just talking about some of the congestion and the problems that we do have over there. And that section in there is some of our high accident frequency.
It is, okay, I imagine it is. It's hairy driving through there. I still do it, but it's,
A lot of the cars that park on Beverly block access from people that are turning out of the driveway, so
Yeah, you
it's
can't-
a problem there.
you cannot see.
makes it hard to
And they-
see.
Yeah, they roll out and they're already in the street.
Yeah.
And then you add the semis that are doing U-turns.
And the other piece of this is, I'm not sure if council is aware, but the hospital has requested, and they're working on some concept plans to put a mid-block crosswalk mid-block in between Western and Stockton Hill there, so.
That sounds cool. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. When I saw that picture, I wanted to ask.
Has the hospital thought about more construction? I mean, as they can add more structures to their campus,
They should.
they're losing parking.
Yes.
So now it's causing parking to be on the street. And I'm not trying to impose on other business or anything, but in the future, that's a lot of cities have had to do.
Yeah.
Hospitals have had to put parking.
Yeah, and it probably is something they should consider. I've not had any specific conversations with them. They recently paved on the opposite side of Beverly, which is the reason for the crosswalk, near the Fast Tracks building, the urgent care building. They've provided additional parking back there to account for some of the parking that's been lost on their campus.
Probably employee parking, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great, and that's a good relief.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the cars that park on the street were because, from what I heard years ago, they instituted a no smoking on campus policy, so people parked on the street so they could smoke in their cars, so.
Oh,
I hadn't thought of that.
right there. I don't think a crosswalk should, I mean, it's convenient. You get hit in the crosswalk, you're right by the emergency room, but it's a good idea.
Well, I mean, they've hired a consultant to prepare plans for it, and I think we'll be talking about it at traffic safety and providing some sort of report to council at some point in the future.
And keep in mind, it's not just a crosswalk, it'd probably be something similar to the hawk signal. It won't be a unrestricted
It'll be a light,
something.
stop traffic in the middle of that.
I would expect that's what you would see.
That's one option. The other option would be to just to have the pedestrian crossing signs with some sort of flashing light and a raised concrete median in the middle to protect pedestrians once they get halfway across.
I think it's
I agree.
Okay, next, what is next? Bull Mountain, there's nothing in fiscal in 2020 for Bull Mountain. The drainage maintenance, 100,000 is, kind of, for channel maintenance. A lot of the storms the summer storms that come through, we don't necessarily know where we're gonna have the problems. Well, I think Jack has a pretty good list of areas of known problems for drainage, projects, but we might get hit on the west side of town or the east side of town, and so we've got a generic, what I will call CIP sheet to just address those. And typically, we have a job order contract in place for contractors to come and maintain those channels. Harvard Sycamore Drainage, I guess we're only gonna talk about the 2020. Is that right? Okay. Hillcrest. Hillcrest is a big one. The October storm that occurred last fall, water shot from Hillcrest. It crossed Stockton Hill and went on the east side of Stockton Hill and flooded several businesses there. So the idea behind this project would be to get that water off Hillcrest. We've recently completed some culvert work under Stockton Hill prior to the paving that's occurring out there this week and later tonight and tomorrow. So to provide more capacity to get this water off Hillcrest. So that's what this project will do. Land acquisition drainage is just, we have a lot of older subdivisions that drainage wasn't accounted for, and we have a lot of lots that lie in the low existing flow patterns, and so as we become aware of those, we've been trying to buy some of those lots up that really don't make a good suitable building site. Master drainage plan update, 251,000. 70% of that is a grant that we're pursuing through FEMA. There's a 30% match of, I believe, 76,000 that the city would come up with on that. That would basically provide a probably 30,000-foot view of the city and a list of major drainage projects and cost estimates for those projects, which would work in conjunction with the next item, the storm rate study, which is what Ron has been talking about, the basically a fee that would, the study would essentially take all these projects that we have, come up with a fee that would be assessed on our utility bills.
So with those fees, how many years do you think it will take to accumulate enough money to actually start doing projects?
Well, I would hope after the first year, we would have enough money to at least have a start.
Okay.
We would still, I think, be obtaining, so we would still obtain the annual allotment from Mojave County Flood Control that gets dispersed to all the cities in Mojave County. So with that and with the fees, we should have money after the first year to begin on some of the projects.
Okay, that's promising.
I have a question about Western from Beverly to Sycamore. Now, this is under stormwater. I know that piece of road was in our pavement preservation for this year, right?
That portion was.
Until it was repealed, till the tax money was repealed. That road is really there, it's crumbling, and that section in particular. What does this address, 88,000 in 2023, is regarding stormwater? Because I don't think we're gonna have a road by 2023.
That would be, yeah, you may be right, but that would be design work, and then the following year would be the construction.
The October 3rd storm, Beverly and Western somewhat are in conjunction, but that storm on October 3rd, the hospital was actually almost took on some severe flooding. They were flooded, but it could have been much worse than what it actually was, and Western would help with that. So the roadway will have to be addressed prior to then. Again, we'll try and hold it together as best we can to get to that point, and then everything would be addressed in one project.
Why is this area of town so bad? The water just comes off the mountain, or?
Yeah, there's big, I mean, that, anytime you get up close to the mountains on either side of us, I mean, we get flooded everywhere, but they seem to make it worse because that's, grade can really give you a lot more on that, but you're probably gonna find that's where your concentration points are. That side of town, you look at the notch behind the hospital, is one of my highest maintenance areas because there's no curb gutter, there was no drainage considerations when it was built in the county, and then we accepted it. It's, we have more than one of those areas, but it's a very high maintenance area for us anytime there's a rainstorm.
Yeah, it's just, there's not a good drainage channel to drain that. The only real drainage channel is, ADOT has one on the north side of I-40 there, but it doesn't take near the amount of flow that come off the hills further west. And,
I drive that about every day, and it's, that road is
Terrible.
decomposing.
Yeah. A couple years back, we did complete, kind of in conjunction with Western, we did complete the segment of Sycamore Avenue between Stockton Hill Road and Western. We put a storm drain in. The Western project would take that storm drain and bring it south on Western to intercept that flow, and then further west on, I believe, Calumet. Because there's no defined channel, storm drain is really the best way, but it doesn't, even storm drain, we can't put all the water in a storm drain. We can maybe get 10% if we're lucky, so,
And
yeah.
Okay,
Okay. No, let's get through wastewater. So, moving on to wastewater. Rob, Keelan, you guys want to walk us through what
Sure.
you're proposing in these?
For next year, we propose a new 10-yard dump truck. That's for transporting our biosolids produced out at the Hilltop plant. Beale Street Sewer Project, which I believe is substantially complete. I
It
guess.
is.
Yeah.
It is, yep.
We have a series of older sewer line replacements, Chestnut Sewer. This would be one of those. This would be phase 2 to a previous project. Chloride Street Sewer, this would be an old clay line. We still have some of those in the ground, so this would be a replacement project. Devlin Avenue Sewer Project, that would be in conjunction with Mojave County. Would extend sewer out there to the Mojave Channel outfall line west of Devlin.
Can I stop you there and ask a question about that, Rob? Sure. So that project, if you look in that area and the homes being so close together and packed in there, can Mojave County work with us as septics fail to require those people to sign up and become sewer customers?
Yeah, we do work with the county on that. I think they're kind of in a tough position, declaring or condemning a property because of a failed septic system. Some of them just have to be pumped on a regular basis. But I know that's a big priority for them, big concern for them.
The lots are so small out there, when a septic fails, I mean, what do they do? I mean, is there even room to do a proper fix?
Some of them, no.
Yeah.
There was a meeting actually yesterday that I wasn't able to go to with the county, but they're looking at some alternative septic slash sewer systems as possible fixes out there.
It'd be in our best interest to just have those customers hook up to the system, wouldn't it?
And there are a lot of our sewer projects as we go through this that are concentrated in that area for that reason. The other part of it is if we do a sewer extension with the smaller lots, then that's a bigger bang for the buck for us as far as getting customers onto the system.
Okay, thanks.
That area out there in the Butler area is the largest area in Mojave County of septic, concentrated septic tanks
Yeah,
like that.
I believe it. They're
Yeah,
so packed in.
They have asked about whether the city can do an improvement district out there, and our answer is unfortunately no, but they would have to do a county improvement district out there.
Yeah.
And obviously they work a little different, so the people would have to come to the county to initiate formation, and that's probably
Not
not
gonna happen.
happening, yeah. But fortunately, the Devlin project, if I may, is one that we've worked together with the county. We're gonna expend city funds to extend the sewer main, and the county is gonna expend their CDBG funds to pay for people to connect, so it's a good project. And hopefully we can have more of these in the future, too.
Our big projects, the downtown sewer outfall line relocation. That's the main outfall line to the downtown plant. As you can see in the photo, a lot of it's above ground, exposed. During the October storm, several of those stanchions were washed out, and the line buckled in a few places, and we were fortunate that we didn't have a spill. But again, a lot of that's located in a wash, which would be a spill into a water of the U.S. So this is a pretty high priority project for us. Diagonal wash interceptor, that's not funded, there's no money next year, but that's a similar project as far as providing sewer service into those smaller lots out in Birdland. Gold Road Avenue, that's another sewer replacement of a old line. Reclaimed water recharge project, council approved the contract for the drillers on that project a few meetings ago, and we should be starting work on that portion of the project in June. Sewer extension capital projects, this is kind of a generic CIP sheet. The Municipal Utilities Commission's developed a list of extensions, kind of looking at, how many new connections we could get and prioritize those. And as we have funding available, we're trying to complete some of those projects. GIS mapping, that's kind of an ongoing project. We've brought in consultants to help us establish a water, wastewater GIS database. It's a very useful tool for us. Our operators out in the field are using it to pull up as-built out in the field to verify locations, and it's also a very good project, or a good product for the public too. Again, sewer line replacement, that's kind of another catch-all. As we run into issues out in the field, we're still finding new locations where we've got newer problems, and this allows us some funding to be able to address those as we come across them. Sewer slip lining, that's a different type of replacement. It allows us to insert I'll turn that one over to Keelan for a little bit.
So I think we talked about this a little bit last year. In fact, I think it was Mayor Miles that had a question regarding that. So this is an alternative method to line rehabilitation. So in hard to access locations, areas that the easements have been built over, I'll just throw out a few examples here. High traffic areas. 2 years ago we did Stockton Hill between Jefferson and Pico, I believe it was. Then last year we looked at some areas, or we completed some line rehabilitation over in the Siri Heights location, Charles Arthur Leo. And then this year we're targeting an area up off Western. So it's just an alternative method. It's trenchless technology. We partner with ProPipe. Typically they come in and they pull a fiberglass resin from manhole to manhole, and then typically cure it out with steam. There's a couple different methods that they can use to cure it, but generally it's with steam. Creates a new pipe inside of the existing pipe, and gives you 50 plus years of added life to that pipe.
Wow, that's really great.
Need more of that.
Yeah. Is it more expensive to do that type of work than to just change?
Really, it's I'd say it's pretty comparable, especially when you take into account when you're doing it in those hard to access locations. It's probably actually a cheaper alternative because you're not having to replace block walls. You don't have the intrusion to you know, people who have built fences up over those locations, so.
That's great.
The size reduction in the pipe doesn't reduce flow, negligible?
It's typically negligible, but that's a good question. So, and Greg may be able to jump in on this one, but, you know, a lot of times when you're replacing those, or when you're rehabilitating those lines, they're old lines, you know, like, let's say, vitrified clay pipe, right? So, the coefficient, or, you know, you may lose, a little bit of size, but you typically gain, some velocity. Sure.
It's very smooth.
Yeah.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Great dialogue.
And we also have a skid steer purchase.
I love that. Fluid flow.
We have a skid steer purchase, and that just allows us to be able to handle some of the brush and such that we utilize at a hilltop for composting the biosolids. Wastewater infiltration projects, we've done when we did the sewer master plan update, we had the Sunrise Engineering identify probable locations where we were getting inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. It's a big consideration for us, especially at the downtown plant, which has a limited capacity. We don't have as much extra capacity downtown as we do up at Hilltop. So when we get a big storm event, we're treating a lot of rainwater runoff, and that's a very expensive way to treat rainwater runoff. And so what we've done a lot of manhole replacements. We'll look at some more manhole replacements. The next phase of that will be some smoke testing of some of the buildings downtown, probably starting with our own. You know, we suspect that a lot of floor drains are hooked into the sewer. A lot of roof drains are probably hooked into the sewer, and that's not the appropriate. But, you know, we're dealing with the old commercial and housing stock down here, but we need to start identifying where that's happening and get that off the sewer system.
Okay, that takes us through. And
What do you want to do?
do you want to eat or do you want to talk about water?
Let's talk about
Let's finish it up.
All right, we can do that. All right, so the last piece of the capital projects is water. Very important projects here. You guys want to walk us through those as well?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Automated meter reading, you know, this will be an ongoing project. The first phase that we're working on now is the meter testing program, you know, identifying our sample size, and start pulling meters out of the ground, testing those to see what the accuracy is throughout the system, and to help us prioritize those replacements. So as we replace those, you know, we still need to make a final determination on whether we do a AMI system or an AMR. AMR system would be drive-by reads, where we would have an interrogator in a vehicle, and as we drove down the block, we would pick up all the reads from the meters on each side. AMI system would be more of a fixed-based system, to where those meters would be transmitting to a tower, which would be transmitting down here every 15 minutes, every half hour with a read. You know, those kind of systems have a lot of benefits, but they're a lot more expensive.
I think so.
The good thing with those is you're pretty much getting live information. So if you pick up a ridiculously high flow on a meter, you know, it could flag it to where someone down here, someone in my office could pick up a phone and call that customer and say, you know, you got a big leak going. But again, it's a lot more upfront cost on the capital side. So, you know, as we get more information in that, we'll become the council maybe for some direction on that.
For example, what's the difference like a regular meter that we're using right now as opposed to automated?
Difference in cost?
Yeah.
It's significant. I'm trying to think of
Pearls, they're about 150.
Yeah, so like, yeah, so about 150 for the new Census iPearls and the standard one. I just approved an invoice the other day, I should know.
For standard.
Yeah, maybe maybe $75 or something
double the cost,
Yeah,
more than.
yeah. But
But
that
look
would,
at the savings in the long term, the water usage, like you said, if someone's having a leak, they don't realize that you can, we've had leak at one of our businesses, that's why I was mentioning.
and you
It
see
makes
those,
total sense.
yeah, you see those horror stories of, you know, the little old lady showing up at the council meeting with a $10,000 water bill. You know,
Exactly.
she had no idea about.
But to convert the whole city is cost
A lot of money.
millions. I remember you told me the number.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
it
I think,
was
you know, we're
shocking.
looking at 8 to 10 million.
8
you
to
know,
10 million.
But I think it would be a phased rollout over time.
Yeah,
and-
very rarely do you see it ever do that.
Yeah, right. So that will be an ongoing project. City Well 10, that's located south of the airport, about a quarter mile from where City Well 11 is. So the well has been drilled and cased, and this project install the pumps and motors and all that. There wouldn't be a tank on this site. This would be pumped over to City Well 11, to that tank there, and then into the distribution main that runs down what will be Rancho Santa Fe Parkway.
Is that over on the corner of Gordon and?
No, that's
Where's this
Castle.
one at?
This is on the east side, just south of the airport.
It's a half mile east of City Well 11, which is the one on Gordon and Rancho Parkway, if that's what.
Oh, I was trying to go on Gordon and Castle.
Castle Rock, yeah.
Oh, no, this is east of the railroad tracks, south of the airport.
So these wells are in the southernmost subbasin of the aquifer, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, they would be still in the
The
Kingman subbasin.
the southernmost, not the,
Wallapai Aquifer. Distribution lines, again, that's kind of a generic one. For old water line replacements, these are prioritized and based upon the water master plan update that was completed. We designed about probably close to $4 million worth of projects this current year that we're in now. So we'll have, unfortunately, we won't have enough money to build all those projects next year. But, we have projects all around town, a lot of them in the Birdland, Butler area, which was, you know, a substandard system when we took it in. And so, you know, a lot of those need replacement. Hydrovac truck, we've been trying to buy this for a couple of years, and we're gonna get it this year, so. It's carried over because we're probably not gonna receive the vehicle until next fiscal year. Foothills 12-inch transmission main, again, that was a recommendation of the water master, oh, that's not funded this year, sorry. Main tank's transmission line, this is about a 1.5 mile line from Keno, or on Keno from Arizona to North Glen. This would be a transmission main to the main tank farm up on Anson Smith. And the concept behind this plan is to, you know, there's a lot of places in the system where our transmission mains are mixed with our distribution lines, which lead to problems with high pressure, low pressure, water hammer in the system as we fire up the boosters at Castle Rock. So this would provide a separate transmission main to try to address some of those. And there's actually 2 phases of this project, and this would be the first phase.
Rob, if I might, and you're doing excellent, so I don't want to overtake you, but we've got a contract that should be on the May 21st council meeting for that phase 1 of that transmission, just as FYI.
May-
Can I go ask you, it's probably a question for you or
Yes.
maybe for Cooper, on to upgrade the water meters, is that something that we can add a charge to the monthly bill to have customers pay to upgrade their own meter? I mean, I know there's all these laws about what kind of surcharges we can add, but if you're a water customer and we want to upgrade your meter so that, you know, our system's more efficient, is that something that every year they pay
I've,
$25 fee or?
I've never heard of a city doing a charge for existing customers to upgrade their meter. I don't know if it's legal to do that or not. I can't speak to that side. I just usually you have your rate study in your master plan that's basically making sure that you're collecting enough money to take on those kind of projects.
But when we're looking at, I mean, everything's so tight, and this is something, the sooner the better, right? Maybe because no one else has done it.
I'm all for
Is that
cutting
possible?
edge.
I don't know. So it's something we'll have to we can look into, but off the top of my head, I'm just not sure if we can make that jump. So. But it's worth looking into.
It is a protective item for the consumer because a number of people do get leaks and
Yeah.
those, I know someone had a $2,000 water bill. That was a surprise.
Yeah, no, for a smart water system, we, I want it desperately, and I get it. The impact to the individual user is an interesting question about them paying for it. I mean,
It's your meter. You know what I mean?
no,
You're
no,
responsible
no, it's
for
not. You're not supposed to touch it.
But
It's not your meter. It's the
now I
city's.
really want to go down there and touch it.
No, don't. We have people that can show you how. I can assure you that they know how to turn it on and off. But yeah, they're changing out all the water meters and charging for it. I would definitely be willing to sit down and look at that. It's a good question.
It is an interesting discussion, though, because of the fact that in this day and age of automated houses and everything else, if a consumer knew that their water meter, if they had a leak inside their house somehow,
Yeah, so
you know what I mean?
Customers, obviously, you're looking at the pro. The con to that is if you live in an older part of town that is using a water meter that's older than 20 years old, you're getting free water. And so we're going to charge you for the meter, and you're going to have a higher water bill because it's going to read better. So I mean, there's some pros and cons.
Which
to
means
that.
your sewer bill's going to be more too because of the sewer
exactly
assessment.
right, exactly right. So, but yeah, we can look at what that if that's a possibility and what it would look like.
When we talk about a $10 million expense, that's not, and it can take a very long time to get to a point where our budget can support that. But if the users start paying a fee now that would collect enough to really start making that happen sooner rather than later, I don't see why we wouldn't do it. If it's needed and there's great benefit to it,
Yeah,
we should get serious.
I've been part of 2 systems that were automated, and the computer would red flag you and tell you, hey, this home's having problems. It also helps you defend what people need to pay because they don't take into account their water bill when they added like a sprinkler system.
And it might be a simpler system to actually just increase the water rate itself to compensate for the.
Well, it would be probably a base rate increase because you're talking about capital. So, but we can definitely talk about it. If the water master plan didn't anticipate it, is probably the reason why it hasn't been more of a conversation, because usually that would be something that's tackled in a rate study and in your master plan. So.
Next project's maintain transmission line phase 2. This would be the phase of the project from Stockton Hill Road to the west, and I believe that the design has started on that project, or it will be shortly.
No, it hasn't started. But I will indicate a section of water line stop.
Good.
Pressure reducing valves, again, this is a generic CIP sheet that we utilize capital renewal funds to update pressure reducing valves or release valves in our system to help address water hammer, which leads to leaks and other disruptions. Pumping equipment is similar, that's used to update motors, natural gas engines, generators, allow us to do some of that capital renewal on some of that older equipment. Santa Rosa transmission line, oh, that's not this year, sorry. Storage tank restoration, this is an ongoing project. Generally, we'll do inspections 1 year and then do design and construction the following year. We'd originally planned to do this project, this is the main tank, #1 tank at the main tank farm. This year, we kind of missed our weather window. You know, we need to take these tanks down in the winter when water demand is lower. And we kind of missed that window this year, so we'll be gearing up to do that project over this coming fall and winter. Surge tanks, it's ongoing maintenance project, again, to try to address water hammer coming out of our pumping stations to allow that to dissipate some of that pressure and reduce leaks. The USGS Aquifer Monitoring Program, that's ongoing. I haven't really gotten an update on where that is now. I know it went on hiatus during the government shutdown for a little while, and I haven't touched base with them again. But that would develop a model showing what's happening to the aquifer, the Wallapai Aquifer, and help us plan for some mitigation and how we can address the impact of the agriculture. Utility power service, this allows us to upgrade some of our electric service entrances, transformers and such at pump stations and well sites. Water conservation plan. So we budgeted for a water conservation plan and drought mitigation study for next year. And I think kind of what spurred this on is, we have a existing water system master plan that's getting a little old, but when we were looking at funding sources, we found some grant programs, the Water Smart Grant Program. FEMA also offers some programs, but they're very competitive, and the big dollar grant programs are open to anyone, so you're competing against Orange County or San Diego or whoever that may be. And just looking at their applications, I don't think that we had the supporting documentation strong enough to be competitive in that field. So that's kind of what the purpose of this plan would be, is to get us some of that. Since we put that sheet in, there's actually some new requirements coming out about resiliency plans, and so we might look to try to address some of that in this category also. So.
When you say resiliency plan, you mean water resiliency?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, with the new water, there's some new water legislation that was passed by Congress this year that established some guidelines, deadlines for communities to based upon the size of the water system to have water resiliency plans in place, sustainability plans in place. So some of that will be affecting us.
Interesting. Good.
Yeah. And then lastly, it's the water GIS mapping. Again, that's we're on year 3 or 4 of that, but that would help us complete the GIS implementation for the water system.
Great. Thank you.
Manager Foggin, on the USGS program.
Yes.
That was a 3-year commitment, and at the end of that, we were supposed to have a model that we could
Correct.
use to make data to push for a non-irrigation area. Is that this year that wraps up?
So it is 2019, I believe, right? And we get the
2020?
report in 2020?
They're still working on the model. They won't even release preliminary draft results until they have everything finalized.
Right,
It's
so-
going to likely be another 6 months. I
Right.
Sure,
anticipate.
but it'll wrap up in fiscal year 20.
Oh, yes, correct, yes, sorry.
And then we would be in a position legislatively to try to push for an INA, or an irrigation area or something.
Well, so,
Some
so,
protections, some protections.
I'm going to say the same thing
I
the
know,
mayor
go
is.
ahead.
So I think we want to be careful about asking or suggesting that that's what we're after. Really, the legislation that Representative Cobb has carried out for us, or is carrying forward for us, that is still alive and hopefully finalized here in the next day or so, is that, I think, the step that we're hoping for to where we can get people to the table and recognize that that we have that an aquifer that is limited in water it can deliver. We want to take this as far as we possibly can without having to tip over into that the actual managed area, because it causes a whole bunch of problems for us. But yeah, this along with, there's another project that the legislature dedicated $100,000 to in last legislative session that's being worked on, that those two studies together should give us a pretty good idea of where we are as far as water resource sustainability, how many, do we have that 100 years? Do we have, is it 200 years or 50 years, or what is it? And then also what can we do as a community?
Can I add just a little bit?
So,
If Representative Cobb's legislation succeeds, which looks hopeful, it will create, for Mojave County and for La Paz County, each will have a study group that has targeted stakeholders assigned and appointed. I think there are, well, I don't even remember the number, but the fact is, this study group, will take all this data from what you've just described, and I think they have until December 2021 to make the recommendations to the legislature, the governor, and Arizona Department of Water Resources, so that's when the next steps, what do we do with this data? That group will kind of be charged with making those recommendations, and INA would certainly be on the table for consideration, but I think there will be a number of things that will come out of that and come to fruition as a result of studying these models.
You could see something completely new come out.
Yeah,
Yes,
there could be some new
absolutely.
legislation, absolutely. And because this legislation is bringing stakeholders that have been reluctant in the past, that's what's really exciting about this, is that there may be something other than just a managed area. There could be some different water use laws.
Exactly. And in fact, that's really what we need.
Yeah.
Because nothing totally fits our particular
Correct.
unique situation, so. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Yeah, do we, we have 3 slides left? Okay, is everybody up for 3 slides? We'll finish this up and then we'll have lunch.
All right, so finally, we wanted to make sure that we gave an overview, and maybe, Tina, you want to just walk us through these last 3 slides? And
Sure, yeah. So this is the fiscal year 20 projects by funding source. And of course, if we talked about this last few years, most of the funding comes from our cash reserve, which is 61%. And then got grants at a large percentage. We also have debt proceeds at a large, that's for that downtown sewer outfall line project. And then some of our projects get funded through transfers, funds, our operating budget, and of course, development investment and contributions. 20s project sources. And then as far as, this just breaks it out by category and by sources, will change slightly when we make that revision to the I-11 fund. But as you can see, again, most of the projects are funded through cash reserves. Those projects are streets and wastewater. And we've got our operating budget. It funds quite a few few of our projects as well, transfers, development investments, our contribution participation. This goes through. It's on. And then this is the projects that we were shared with you just a couple of weeks ago, and just wanted to be sure. 5-year capital improvement portion is present as well. See its streets and stormwater are our largest portions that are our largest category. Total of almost $65 million projects.
I think not. Thank you, Tina, and thank you all for being here and for all the work that went into this budget. I really like the new format. I think it's very easy to follow, so thank you, Manager Falcon. Are there any other comments or questions before we adjourn? No? Then I think we have lunch served, and thank you for your time, and this meeting is adjourned.